Good morning. It's Friday, October 10th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 735 days old. It could be counting down now. It's a big day here. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I am sure that I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back to the FDD Morning Brief. And away we go. The Israeli cabinet approved the ceasefire deal last night, and the IDF has started to pull back to the yellow line in Gaza. We heard Effie Defrin, the spokesman for the IDF, talk about it just this morning. I don't think any of phase one was ever really in doubt. There was no way that Bibi would dare challenge this deal after Donald Trump invested so much presidential capital. But there is that nagging question about the prisoner release. 250 life sentence terrorists and another 1,700 other dirtbags set to be released. At one point, we were hearing lots of rumors about a possible release of arch-terrorist Marwan Barghouti. Looks like the Israelis made that a red line. He will not be released, according to the most recent reports. And the deal is moving forward. I'm mostly happy with what I'm seeing, but the hard work really begins now. More on that in just a few minutes. Today's guest is Eyal Hulata. He was the second ever guest on this program, which makes him really famous. Oh, and you also might know him for being the national security advisor to Israeli Prime Ministers Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid. Before that, he spent more than 2 decades working the Iran file with some of Israel's finest intelligence professionals. Today, he holds the distinction of being the inaugural Senior International Fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's coming your way in about 6 minutes, maybe 5 3/4. The 72-hour clock has started to count down. We all wait for the hostages to be released and then for Hamas to be dismantled. If that sounds difficult, I've got news for you. The hardest work is yet to begin. First, the post-war future in Gaza is far from written. The challenges associated with rebuilding this coastal enclave will be ginormous. We still don't know exactly who will help bring order to the chaos, nor do we know how. Some serious heavy lifting ahead. Second, even if the post-Hamas era in Gaza goes swimmingly, we still have a very messy Middle East to contend with. Hezbollah is not fully dismantled. The Houthis keep popping off missiles and drones, and the Islamic Republic of Iran is just itching for another tussle with Israel. In other words, Israel is still fighting its war of independence against multiple actors that seek to destroy it. As the scripture says, the guardians of Israel neither slumber nor sleep. And then there's the diplomacy. At the end of hostilities in Gaza yields a window for the widening of the Abraham Accords. I hear Indonesia may be ready for a deal right now. The Saudis may be ready soon too. And after that, we could see a domino effect across the Muslim world. But this stuff won't happen by itself. It'll require some serious work, most notably from the Trump administration. So yes, Trump deserves his victory lap. He should take one, but then it's right back to work. No rest for the weary. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, the Treasury Department rolled out a fresh round of Iran sanctions. The latest package included some 50 targets. Treasury slapped sanctions on more than 4 dozen individuals, entities, and vessels that facilitate Iranian oil and gas sales. These actors help the regime export billions of dollars worth of petroleum and petroleum products. That's money the regime used to fund its terrorist proxies. The sanctions hit Iran's bagmen in China. Among the targets are an Iranian oil terminal in China, as well as China's teapot refineries that's purchased millions of barrels of Iranian oil since 2023. For those keeping track at home, this is the 4th time the Trump administration has targeted refineries in China that purchase Iranian oil. Reminder, China is an ally and an enabler of the Islamic Republic. Headline 2, while we're on the China beat, the U.S. Department of Commerce added over a dozen Chinese companies to a restricted trade list. Why? Because these companies are helping terrorists in the Middle East acquire American technology. That's why. Chinese companies are believed to be helping groups like Hamas and the Houthis get their hands on American components and tech for weaponized drones. One company caught my eye. It was operating in an illicit network that buys and supplies drones and other components to front companies that serve Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. Let me take another quick jab at Turkey here. Commerce also added Turkish companies to the entity list. And yes, once again, I remind you, Turkey is the worst NATO ally ever. Seriously, they make Hungary look awesome. Headline 3, Israel disrupted a major arms smuggling operation into the West Bank. On Wednesday, the Shin Bet announced the seizure of a huge haul, including 4 drones, 15 anti-tank rockets, an RPG launcher and 3 RPGs, 20 hand grenades, 53 handguns, and a whole lot more. The saga began months ago when the IDF detained a weapons dealer in Ramallah. The weapons were destined for terrorists in the West Bank, according to the Shin Bet. The IRGC oversaw the whole thing. Thankfully, it ended in a bust. But cross-border smuggling via Jordan is a serious, serious problem. Israel's border with Jordan is just way too porous for comfort, which is why Israel is planning to upgrade the border fence and even establish a new military division to tackle the threat. This can't happen soon enough. In the meantime, I'd just love to see Jordan step up its game. But I'm not holding my breath because the Hashemite regime would rather just take pot shots at Israel all day while allowing the IRGC to trample all over its borders. Seriously, folks, getting tired of this. And with that lovely sentiment, it's time for my interview with Eyal Hulata. I know he's been tracking the news closely out of Israel, so let's welcome him onto the show. Welcome back to the program. Eyal Hulata, you're now a multiple repeat offender.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here. It's great to be on the morning brief. And a hopeful day. You know, it's a especially good day to be on the show.
Yeah, it is. Couldn't have planned it better. Thrilled to have you. So let's start with the deal, and let's start with a quick breakdown. What does Israel get? What does Hamas get? How does it all go down?
So, let's go over the fundamentals. At the core of the deal is it's a ceasefire. I mean, President Trump calls it a peace plan. Not peace yet. It's a ceasefire plan. The first episode must be the release of the hostages, all 48 of them, about 20 alive, 28 deceased. That should happen within 72 hours. I think the media remarks I've seen is that this is expected to be on Monday, right after President Trump's expected visit to Israel. Along that line, Israel, as you said, started redeploying its forces, and which will lead us to the second phase, which will be a negotiated, more broader ceasefire, introduction of a governing entity in Gaza, acronymed GITA, the Gazan International Transfer Authority, or something along these lines, which basically means a host of technocratic, some of them Palestinians, potentially a representation of the PA, maybe one representation of the PA, but more importantly, the involvement of the regional countries, the Tony Blair initiative behind it, to sustain some kind of a civil governance in Gaza. This needs to happen hand in hand with the disarmament, or the continuous disarmament of Hamas, which is the most sticky point of them all. So by and large, if this comes to a complete materialization, the way this was conceived, Gaza will remain without the leadership of Hamas, with no Hamas terrorists holding their weapons, and with a border that is defensible. Will we see this? Well, maybe when the Messiah comes, but at least the first stage that would release the hostages back and bring a ceasefire that can allow Israel to take care of other business that we're going to talk about this morning. I think this is the main achievement, and all praises to President Trump, to his son-in-law Jared Kushner that came back for this, with the whole team, Witkoff and the rest, to be able to push all of the stakeholders to reach this agreement that weeks ago seemed like impossible.
Yeah, and I mean, it was interesting. Kushner came out of retirement for this, so to speak. He had stayed out of it. I mean, he'd been out of the public eye. He comes out just for this, to push it over the finish line. We saw him sitting next to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday with that cabinet meeting. And of course, the Israeli cabinet met. Some ministers voted against, some of the usual suspects, the Itamar Ben-Gvirs and the Bezalel Smotriches of the Israeli political spectrum stood against the deal, but it did pass. And Bibi made it seem like this was kind of a big win. And I think it is, obviously, getting the hostages back. But apart from the hostages, let me ask you, what are the things that the Israeli government are saying are the big wins for this deal?
All right, so let's start with the wins, and then, of course, we need to talk about the obstacles. And, of course, it is political, but there are also objective obstacles that we must look at. I think the major win, as it comes to Netanyahu, is the ability to bring this deal alongside with President Trump that releases all of the hostages in one event, or hopefully will be in one round. This is something that Netanyahu has been advocating in the recent weeks and several months. Of course, before that, he preferred this to be in stages. But I think the objective reason to this was this notion that Hamas will never give away all of the hostages, and they will always want to keep some of them as an insurance policy. Well, this paradigm or hypothesis has been broken, or hopefully broken with this deal. And again, we need to see that this comes through. This is really important. I think the second big element of it is the involvement of the region, which is something that Israel has been seeking for a long while. Gaza cannot rule itself. Gaza cannot reconstruct itself. The involvement of the pragmatic countries, not only Egypt and Jordan, but mainly the UAE, the Saudis. This is very, very important. And I think these are the major things that Prime Minister Netanyahu can monetize and claim success for. And then comes, a host of things that are on the other side of it. Some of them are maybe more difficult for this composition of Israeli government, the most right-wing government we've ever had. The first is release of terrorists, of prisoners, and large numbers of them. Now, we knew this will happen. We knew that when there will be a release of hostages by a deal, there will be a big wave of release of prisoners. In fact, Israel already released prisoners in previous rounds, but there were fewer and maybe less dangerous because Hamas kept the important assets, as they call them, the soldiers, till the end, and it was clear that this will happen. That's a big deal, John. It's a big deal across the Israeli political spectrum, and especially for this ultra-right-wing government. There has been a debate over the names, and as you mentioned before, it seemed that Israel was able to veto some of the important prisoners. You mentioned Barghouti. Barghouti isn't even Hamas. He shouldn't be released in a swap that has to do, that is done in a deal with Hamas. So that shouldn't come as a surprise. But there are other very heavyweight, what we call in Hebrew, with dam al yadayim, with blood on their hands, with Israel, with Jewish blood on their hands. There are several that will not be released, but there are many that would. So this is one thing. The second element there, of course, is that Hamas is not surrendering, right? They're not declaring defeat. They are not immediately surrendering their weapons and leaving Gaza the way that Netanyahu for a while said this will be the ultimate victory. This is the strive. We want to see all of the Hamas terrorists outside of Gaza. Otherwise, there cannot be any reconstruction. People like me have thought that this was an unrealistic objective. And part of the reason why we couldn't end the war was because we were striving for unrealistic objectives. So I'm not surprised that this is the fact. But for this government that have made the case that they will continue to fight until the total victory, well, it will be hard to sell this as a total victory. I think it's a big win for Israel. I think, again, Hamas has been decimated. We can talk about this more if you want, to a point where Israel should be able to maintain the security arrangement around Gaza and prevent Hamas from becoming a military power again. But that's a big loss. And the third thing that I will mention is the role of Turkey and Qatar. The negotiation was in Egypt and not in Doha, and I'm very happy for that. But, a month ago or several weeks ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu ordered an aerial strike in broad daylight in Doha in the beginning of September, September 9th, if I'm not mistaken, exactly a month ago. And there was a message there that Qatar should be isolated and we should single out the way that they have supported Hamas. Well, they're back. The Minister of Qatar has been part of the negotiation. A representative of Qatar was in the White House while President Trump handed Netanyahu the phone to apologize to the Emir of Qatar. And the Turks are all in again. We've seen Kalim, the head of their intelligence service, also in the negotiation room in Egypt. Erdogan is talking about his attitude. I think there is also some payment for Turkey for this. They had to squeeze Hamas to let this deal, and hopefully President Trump will continue to hold his squeeze on the throat of both Erdogan and the Emir of Qatar so that Hamas does not resurrect, because this is part of the deal and a part of the 21 points of Trump. But I think basically those are the three things. The fact that Hamas stays in Gaza in some capacity, and the involvement of the Islamist backers of the region.
Yeah, and I will say I am obviously no fan of Turkey or Qatar, and I got to acknowledge something here, that the inclusion of these two countries in the negotiations. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when John Kerry was inviting them in to the discussions during the 2012 and 2014 conflict, and the Israelis were absolutely adamant about not including them, and here they are just waltzing right in. On the other side of that, though, I have to say, Trump has been very transactional with them. I don't see this as just simply like, oh yeah, you're welcome, come on in. It's, hey, you're sponsors of Hamas. You deliver these guys on a plate. I want this war over. And that does appear to be what Donald Trump's done. And I think he deserves credit for it. But I think you're right to be concerned about, okay, what's the role of these two countries moving forward? I understand they may actually have a presence on the ground for the implementation of phase 2, which I really, really don't like. I think they are intelligence risks to Israel, maybe even military risks, because we know that they are dead set on the destruction of the state of Israel and the propping up of jihadi groups like Hamas.
Yeah, I totally agree. And their presence on the ground will make it difficult for the IDF to continue interdicting Hamas. And this will be the balance, right? Because if Hamas does not volunteer to surrender their weapons, and the purpose of the second phase, as you said, was that this international coalition of regional actors will force Hamas to do this. I don't see how this will happen with the involvement of the Turks, of the Qataris. By the way, I'm not sure I see how this happens even if it was only the Egyptians and the Emiratis and the Saudis. Yeah. But this combination will be very difficult. But this is the second phase. As I said, the first phase, and hopefully this will happen, we'll see the hostages back and a ceasefire in conditions that allow the IDF to hold this environment properly.
Inshallah, as we say. All right, let me broaden this out for a minute. Trump's calling this the end of a 3,000-year conflict. I'm obviously not buying that, but he can say whatever he wishes. The war doesn't end, right? It continues on some fronts. I mean, I guess maybe I'm asking you, let's leave Iran aside for a second because I want to ask you about Iran in general, but let's take a look at the other 6 fronts. They're not gone, right? But they look like Israel's, I mean, when you think about what Israel's locking in right now, it has gained the upper hand, I think, on all of them. Am I wrong?
Yeah. No, you're not wrong, John. I think militarily, it's quite clear. There are also other fronts, what I call, or other people call the 8th front, which is Israel's public image, in which we lost on all accounts and on every hour and every day that the war continues. But you're right, militarily, Hamas has been decimated to a point where it is no longer an army, definitely not anything remotely close to being able to do what they've done on October 7th, and we need to keep them that way. Hezbollah have been degraded significantly, way better than in any other conflict we've ever had, and we need to keep it that way. When we count all the other fronts, we count the West Bank, which is kept relatively stable, but still, there's a chance of this inflaming in any point in time. Syria, Assad is gone, El Jolani is there, Ahmed al-Shara. Complicated, but there are engagements, to be able to see if we can reach some kind of security arrangement with them. The Iraqis, and of course, the Houthis. And the Houthis, before we go to Iran, we talk about it separately. And the Houthis are probably at the moment the only proxy Iran still has that can continue to fire on Israel at will. And in fact, they do this regularly. There is a premise that once the war in Gaza stops and we have a ceasefire, the Houthis will stop firing. By the way, if they don't, this will lead to a collapse of the entire arrangement also with Gaza, because we know that there is this linkage between them. The Houthis have said it, Hamas have said it, even the Iranians have said it. So Israel has the upper hand on all of them. And now to your point, the audience that is following Israel's not only current affairs, but also the history. This has been the story of the Zionist country in the Middle East since even before the conception, right? I mean, this has been our story for more than 100 years. We have to fight for our survival because we're surrounded by enemies that want to kick us out and murder and slaughter all of us if they only get a chance. So the sheer fact that they have not completely capitulated doesn't come to surprise to someone who knows the difference between countries like Egypt that have made a sound decision after the Yom Kippur War, or just mentioning the 52nd anniversary of it. And President Sadat went from that war to engage into a peace agreement and a peace process that led to signing of the first a peace deal for Israel. And the Jordanians did as well. And most of the pragmatic Sunni countries have come to realize that Israel is just a fact and they should not fight it. They should collaborate with it. Hence the Abraham Accords. But this is not true for the terror organization. This is not true for the Shiite-backed terror organization or the Muslim Brotherhood-backed organization. And this is the new reality that Israel has been facing for several decades, right? So the fact that these guys do not capitulate should not come as a surprise. Israel needs to maintain our ability to defend properly, to know, to strike, and to act before they come at us. There is a verb in English that I'm missing now, John. I'm sorry.
Prevent.
Yes, yeah. Preempt. Thank you, John. Right. We need to be able to preempt in time when we know something is happening. This is something that Israel has refrained from doing properly in the last 2 decades. This is something we need to do way better to keep them all down, to make sure they understand they shouldn't pick a fight with us, and to bolster our ability to collaborate with the pragmatic countries. This is difficult to do when there is an open war like we've been had in Gaza.
And I think that's the achievement, right? I mean, you end that war and it opens up the possibilities for some of this other stuff. It doesn't mean that you stop deterrence. It doesn't mean that you stop preemptively striking, but it does mean that you have this moment to start to reimagine the map after a huge shakeup, right? I mean, this has been a traumatic 2 years, but that's the kind of the upside, if there is one, is that all of this stuff has been jostled, right? Like the entire region's been shaken up. And so now there's an opportunity to rebuild. But all right, let me get to this question. And I got one more before I let you go. But look, you've been working the Iran issue for a long time, right? The regime from the outside, it looks unstable and it looks weak and it looks paranoid, and everything that I'm hearing gives a sense that there's an internal mess inside the Islamic Republic. And at the same time, we're hearing that they're still trying to build a full arsenal of ballistic missiles. They want to hand more of them off to the Houthis. They are trying to reconstitute their air defenses. They may try to get that nuclear program back on track. What do you see as the kind of the game moving forward? What are you watching for as an Iran analyst as we head into this next phase?
Yeah, and that's a great question, John, especially because we need to also remember, on top of everything you said, that Iran has every interest to prevent Israel from going back into the normalization process with the region. This is a main reason why October 7 happened in the time it happened, because if Israel would have normalized with Saudi Arabia, and we were, I think, this close, but relatively close, that would have been a strategic blow to Iran, and they unfortunately were able to derail this. And let's see how we put this back, right? So Iran is also the key spoiler to all of the processes that are happening right now. If I need to single out the major spoiler to prevent Gita from taking effect, for instance, it wouldn't be the Qataris, it wouldn't be the Turks, it will be Iran. Because God forbid this succeeds, who knows? Maybe Israel can live in peace with its neighbors in some sort, and then their vision of ultimate jihad against Israel will have less supporters. This is mind-blowing for the regime in Iran. So I think we need to take that also into context. I'm very worried that something might happen for this reason in the next few days. And this puts me to the objective that Israel must hold. The first is intelligence. We need to be really, really good now to see what Iran is planning. How do they understand the situation? How they think they can, God forbid, use or exploit whatever opportunity they have to prevent this from becoming in Israel's favor again. And we need to be very careful. We need to be careful as it comes to the nuclear program. We definitely need to be careful as it comes to the proxies and to other subversion of countries and processes in the region. They can blow up an embassy, right? They can they've done this before. They can try to blow up the West Bank. You just mentioned the introduction of a huge smuggling of arms into the West Bank. What are they accumulating all of those arms in the West Bank, if not to try to reproduce a huge attack over Israeli settlers and the military when they have a chance? These are all things we need to be very, very worried about. Now, on the more broader spectrum, you mentioned the missile program. I think if Iran's learned a lesson from the 12-day war was that they cannot think that they can hurt us just by the equipment and technology that they had. They need more. They do know that if they have more missiles than we have interceptors, and if they have missiles that can evade our defense mechanisms, then their missiles are more effective than any other missile that Israel has engaged in ever. They're big, they're fast, and they have very good explosives, way better than the Houthis' threat to us, especially if they fire in barrages in large numbers. Iranians got that, and I'm sure that they will try to replenish and to reconstitute their threat against Israel. This is something we have to be mindful for. And directly on the nuclear aspect, snapback came, have a chance to celebrate that with you guys, something that FDD has been fighting for and advocating for years and years before. And personally, I'm very happy that this happened and singles out Iran, make sure that everybody understands that they're in complete violation of every norm in nuclear and any other aspect or arrangement that they have ever tried to convince the world that they will agree to. We need to keep the fight marching on, and I truly hope that the Trump administration will continue to push toward that. We need not only maximum pressure on the people, as FDD puts it, we need maximum support of the people of Iran, and it's important, maybe there will be conditions to have a total strategic change in the way that Iran poses a threat to the region.
Let's hope. Okay, before I let you go, just 30 seconds, if you would. What country do you see coming next in the Abraham Accords? I'm hearing Indonesia. Is that where you're hearing?
Yeah, so I was happy to hear you say that, because I think there is this conception that the next country will come from the region. Everybody are talking about the Saudis again, but I think you're right. I mean, I think it's very likely that it will not come from the immediate region, because the countries around us have been suffering with their own people from the war in Gaza in ways that we wouldn't imagine before, right? I mean, I think in previous talks, even maybe on the morning brief, we've all spoken before that the Saudis don't really care about the Palestinians, and what they care is about the arrangement with the Americans and the benefits of an agreement with Israel. Well, this is no longer the case, right? The fact that the war has been so long and so brutal, and we have to recognize that it's been so brutal, even if Israel has all the justification to do it, the scenes are very, very disturbing. And to people who are not affiliated or empathic to Israel in the first place, this is the case, right? We hadn't had a chance to talk about this. I'm very worried about Israel's image in the Western world, even more than I'm in the region, right? I mean, the United States, we see the polls, the support of Israel is on the decline. So why would we be surprised that this is happening in the region? So yeah, I think it might be Indonesia, a little bit far. Maybe their new president can contain the public opinion in some way and definitely get the benefits from the Americans for his own needs and concerns in Southeast Asia. Let's see. But first, this all has to start with the return of the hostages, all of them, and a permanent ceasefire in Gaza with good security arrangements, so that the people of Israel will know that they can come back to their homes in the south and also in the north, and we can restore some of the normality that Israel needs so desperately.
Amen. We're going to leave it there. Thank you, Eyal. You've been very generous with your time. Thanks for joining us today on the.
Thank you, John.
Always good to hear from that guy. Finger on the pulse of what's going on in Israel and across the Middle East. Here's what FDD has on tap for you today. FDD's Mariam Wahba published a policy brief on our website about weapons-laden drones that have been buzzing across the Egyptian border and into Israel. Over the summer, the IDF recorded a whopping 384 drone breach incidents and hundreds of other drone sightings in the span of just over a month. Egypt and Israel both have an interest in securing that shared border, but Egypt needs to step up. As Mariam points out, this gives Washington an opportunity to foster closer cooperation between these two countries that share a downright frigid peace. In his latest column for the Washington Times, FDD founder, president, and supreme leader Cliff May reflects on President Trump's Gaza deal. It's remarkable that Trump got the Saudis, Egyptians, and even longtime Hamas backers in Turkey and Qatar on board. But Cliff warns, rightly, that everlasting peace is not a given. I'm not even sure just fleeting peace is a given. Hamas is bent on obliterating Israel, and it's not going to give up easily. And in fact, it may not give up at all. Finally, FDD's Sophie McDowell published an FDD research memo explaining why the congressionally established U.S. Cyberspace Solarium Commission did the unexpected. It drafted actual recommendations that achieved high levels of implementation. Say it ain't so. Sophie argues that the commission was successful because its members kept showing up, stayed nonpartisan, and didn't stop working after the report was published. These are good lessons for future commissions that want to get stuff done in Washington. All right, time to put this thing to bed. If you're craving more brainy content, check out the expert analysis on our website, fdd.org, and across all of our socials. And don't worry, folks, you can make that tax-deductible donation at fdd.org/invest anytime, day or night. I promise the website stays open. Tune in Monday for an episode that hopefully breaks down the successful implementation of phase one of this deal. Eager to see those hostages come home. Fingers crossed, toes crossed, eyes crossed. I don't care. I'm crossing everything. Until then, enjoy your weekend. I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FDD.